This is the second of two videos that I'm doing on data management on MyFlightbook involving models, manufacturers, and aircraft. The last video covered models and manufacturers, and this one will dive deeper into aircraft. Uh, all three are, of course, shared amongst all pilots on MyFlightbook. And this is incredibly powerful because it means that there's an incredibly rich and continually improving in accuracy data set. And it has other benefits. You can go read the blog, for example, for why aircraft are shared on MyFlightbook. But it does mean that there's a little bit of data curation required. I've got over 300,000 aircraft in the system as of this recording, and that grows all the time. Excuse me. And but the actual amount of data curation is not really all that much. It's a few things a day. It just doesn't take all that much time. So I'm going to start with the emails that you get if you are a data manager on MyFlightbook. So first email is the email that you get if someone edits an aircraft in what is considered a minor edit. So you may have seen an email that looks like this. So here is an aircraft. I made this one up. It actually, there actually really is an aircraft 9876 X-ray, but I just made this up for the demo. And here, this aircraft got changed from a 151 to a 161. And the vast majority of the time, the correct response to that is you nod your head because, oh yeah, it actually was a 161. It was in there wrong. But if it's wrong, then all the people who fly that aircraft see this email and get a chance to say, wait a minute, if in fact the edit was wrong. Now, this is what's considered a minor edit, meaning I'm keeping the manufacturer, I'm keeping the category and class, and I'm keeping the ICAO code the same in both the before and the after. So usually this is, excuse me, the example that I actually give in the email where you have a vanilla 172 and someone corrects it to be the more specific 172S. I'll discuss a major edit in a few minutes. Depending on the tail number, I may have a template for a link to the registry where you can look it up online for November aircraft, U.S. registered aircraft. I have that, and it'll take you right there. And so here you can actually see it looks like it's the actual aircraft was a Cessna 185, but I just made it up for this, excuse me, for purposes of this demo. So in addition to that email, which goes out to all of the people who use that aircraft, the admins, data admins, get a slightly different email. It's basically the same thing, but it tells you who was the user who made the change and what was their email address in case you need to contact them. And it's got a link to edit the aircraft. And you notice that link has A=1 at the end. That means I want to edit it in admin mode. And it means that if I save changes, I won't be saving changes I won't be adding it to that aircraft to my account because I don't want it in my account. I don't fly the aircraft. So if I click on that and wait for the page to load, there we go. You'll see that this page looks a little bit different from how it looks for non-admins. First thing you'll see is that it says admin mode up here. Next thing you'll see is a little locked checkbox. Particularly for aircraft that have a lot of pilots flying them, sometimes you can have a little bit of a tug of war for what the correct designation is. And when that happens, I come in and the first thing I do is I lock it and I say update to actually save the fact that it's locked. And then users can't make edits to the aircraft anymore. And it has to go through an admin to make changes. As an admin, even if it's locked, I can still make any changes as appropriate. So I can then review things. Here's the link to the registration. Again, for US aircraft and for British and Canadian and Australian and a few other countries, I conform the link. So you get the link, and for others, Sorry, no link, because I don't know how to look them up. You have to find it in some other way if you want to do any research on it. But perhaps, yeah, and usually the edit is fine, or you revert the edit because you check it and somebody changed it from a 172R to a 172S, and you're like, no, it really is an R. You're wrong, and so you'll revert it. You may have to lock it. You may have to contact the pilot who made the change just to make sure that you got all that right. But this is where you can wade in and review things. And again, most of the time, I pull up this page, I look up the registration, and I'm like, yep, that edit was just fine. But suppose, for example, that in this case, the pilot who changed it from a 151 to a 161, maybe I flew it originally as a 151, and that aircraft crashed, and someone bought a new aircraft and kept the same tail number, and that one is a 161. So it looked like a minor edit, but it's actually two different airframes. So you can fix that here as well. And this is really only an issue for the minor edit scenario. You'll notice down here at the below what everybody else gets to see, you see all of the users of this aircraft and a create new version button. Now, in this case, these users are both me, again, for the demo and for privacy. But maybe I flew it as a 151 and the new user flew it as a 161. And so I want to actually have both versions of the aircraft. So what I can do is I can change this back to the 151 and put myself, I can say migrate into the new aircraft and say create new version. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a new version of 9876 X-ray and make it and it'll be a 151, and it's going to move me into that new aircraft, and it's going to leave the other me in the 161. So if I say create new version, think, there we go. And so now here's the 161, and the me that changed it to a 161 is still in this one, and here is the 151, and the me that flew it as a 151 has that one. It gets a little confusing with demo accounts. You'll also see here a merge button. That's another admin only thing, and that does basically the reverse, where create new version down here splits an aircraft into two. Merge takes this aircraft, so in this case the 151, and merges it into whatever this aircraft is, which in this case is the 161. So I can undo what I just did by clicking merge into main. So let me show what happens if someone makes a major change. And now here again, you get a similar email for all the pilots who have that aircraft in their account. So here I have, again, I just arbitrarily made it up for the purposes of the demo. I had it in there. It was a 172, and someone else just changed it to be a Dreamliner. Again, tail numbers do get reused. This can be a perfectly legitimate scenario. So in this case, the system saw, oh look, it's a single engine land to a multi-engine land, or it might have looked at no type rating required to a type rating required, or it might have looked at an ICAO code of C-172 becoming an ICAO code of B-789, or it might have looked at a Cessna becoming a Boeing. Any one of those things would trigger it as a major change. And in a major change, it just does the it does that make new version thing automatically, and it clones the aircraft. And so what it's listing here is, here's what it was, here's the new one, here's where you are, you're still in the 172, these are the versions that are available to you. So if you look at that and you say, yeah, no, I flew it as a 172, great, you nod your head, all is good. If you say, wait a minute, that should have been a Boeing 787 in my account, I can go in and edit it and pick that version. And that's all standard non-admin functionality. So here's the admin view on that. Because again, I don't get that email if I don't have that particular aircraft in my account, but I do get this email, and it tells me who the user was that made the change. Here's the old model and here's the new model, and here's a link to the model, to the aircraft. And if I click it, so here it is as the 787, and you can see again the previous version of the 172. And so it's the exact same process as an admin as what I just showed for a minor change, just sort of in reverse. I can decide, something, these really are the same aircraft. I can merge them. I can, I can deal with that in the way that I think is appropriate. I can also make one of them the default. So for example, perhaps this used to be a 172 years and years ago, and now it's assigned to a Dreamliner. And so make default is appropriate for the Dreamliner. But if I click on the 172 and I decide that that one should be the default, then I can click make default there. And all make default means is if I have a spreadsheet and I'm importing, or I type November 9876 Yankee, the default one is the one that'll be used by default. But a user can always come in and either say, I want to use the other one, or I want to use both. Probably a very common scenario for both is I have the same airplane on wheels and on floats. So you want two different versions of the aircraft. I get a couple of these emails a day. It's really not a lot of work. So let me show the additional aircraft tools that are available. Again, if you have any admin privileges at all on the site, you have an admin menu here. And if you have data privileges, then you have an aircraft issues tab. So let me show you this page. And I'm actually going to start down here at the bottom, where probably the most useful thing is if I want to look up an aircraft, I can just go November 9876 X-ray, and I can find those two aircraft that I just split into two. You can also use wildcard, so I can look for 987 blank X-ray. So a question mark is just one character, or I can use an asterisk for multiple characters. And I can see all the different aircraft in the system. And again, you can see that some of these are duplicated aircraft. So like 9876 X-rays in there duplicated. All right, let's take a look at what other tools there are up here. So starting from the top, dupe aircraft. So when an aircraft gets cloned, I assign it a version number. So there was 9876 Yankee or X-ray version 0 and version 1. And the lowest number version is the default one, and all the others are alternatives. And occasionally you can get a situation where you have two aircraft that have the same tail number and the same model, and different version codes, or that have the same tail number, different models, but the same version code. Neither is a terrible problem. It's a data cleanliness thing. But if I click this, it's going to do a little bit of thinking. And here, I think part of the issue was that some of these had hyphens and not. So you'll see tail number and normalized tail. The normalized tail is just the tail number without any hyphens. And so here I have 160839 and 16-0839. But these are both T44 alphas. So in this case, they're both version 0, but because they're the same model, the right thing to do is to click on the aircraft to open it in a new window. And I can just merge the two together like I described, because it's the same model. So it's not gonna screw up anybody's logbook. And now those are the same. But sometimes you'll find that they are in fact different models, and so they need different version codes. And so what you can do in that case is you can just you click on edit, and you can select the version code and fix that there. That's really all there is to that. I haven't actually used that tool in a long time. Second thing here is dupe sims. Very rarely need to use this as well. The idea in the system is that for a given model, there are at most 4 different sim aircraft on that. There's one that's uncertified, one that's an ATD, one that's an FTD, and one that's a full flight sim. That's it. And if anyone else wants to do a second FTD on that specific model, they just reuse the existing one. And the system's actually pretty good about keeping it that way. But in this case, I actually had to go into the database and induce a duplicate. So here we have two Frasca 42s that are both instance type 4, which I think is FTD. Doesn't really matter for purposes here. Same model. So this one has 156 users and 1,086 flights. This version has 20 users and 174 flights, and they're identical. So what I can do is I can click keep this, and it will just merge the twin into this one, the Sim 242 instead of Sim 242 one. Next one is invalid aircraft. This one generally never yields any invalid aircraft, and what it's just doing is going through and looking for aircraft that violate tail number rules, or that are meant to be sims but not flagged as sims, or things like that. So for example, sims all have to begin with the SIM prefix, and real aircraft can't begin with the SIM prefix. So it just goes through and performs that, and not a lot of issues. The code is pretty good against guarding against that. If I want to, I can take a look at all the sims on the system. There are a ton of them. I never use this. This is an old thing, but the main thing I can do with it is I can suggest a new tail, and when I click preview, it'll generate a potential new tail, because all these tails are generated automatically by the system. So here, for example, we see these ESFNPT2s. I have 1, 2, and 4, and so when I said preview, it's suggesting 3, and if I click rename, it'll rename it from 4 to 3 to make sure that there's no naming collision. I can't remember the last time I've done anything with this, so let's move on. This one I do use frequently, orphaned aircraft. And this is going to find all of the aircraft that are in the system that have no users using them. So a user added it to their account, and then they deleted it from their account, and no one else has it in their account. So it's just cruft. Not a whole lot here, but I can delete them individually, or what I usually do is just click on delete all orphans, and it'll delete them all in a bulk manner. The one thing that can be useful to do after you do that is now go check and see if there are any orphaned models. There might be. You can clean up the model, and then after you've deleted the orphaned model, you can see if there are orphaned manufacturers. And so it's a database cleanliness problem. There is no actual problem with having these aircraft. The other thing that I do, actually usually after I clean up orphaned aircraft, is I look for pseudo-generic aircraft. And what I mean by this is where there's either someone making up a tail number, or they are there's something that looks like a typo, or something that just doesn't look right. So the most common thing that I'll see is something like here. There's somebody made up the tail number 8K cab for an 8K cab, and AA5 for a Grumman AA5. Or they made up a tail number, anonymous. This is actually real data here. Anonymous for an Embraer 145. All of these are properly done using the anonymous functionality in this system. It just helps avoid naming collisions. In particular, for example, Cessna 150, C is the prefix for Canadian aircraft. And so you could potentially have a naming conflict with existing aircraft. And so you can see the number of flights that each of these have. And I can do one of two, well, for these guys, I can do one of two things. I can say migrate generic, and that will that will get rid of 8K cab and move any flights into an anonymous 8K cab aircraft. So it's cleaner. There's no naming conflicts. I can also, if I see something FFSO, I can click on that to view the aircraft, I can then hopefully look up the registration for it, which I can also do here. So this is a Canadian one, so it has a registration link. You'll notice anonymous doesn't have a registration link because I don't know what to do with an AN prefix. But if I click on registration for CFFSO, I can look up FFSO. And that one doesn't exist, but it could be legitimate. In this case, it got picked up because it's got FFS in it. So I have, so it could have been a full flight simulator that they were trying to do. So I could also migrate that to a sim, and in which case it'll use one of those existing sim blah 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 Robinson R44s. And for all of these, I can say, you know, something that looks like it's bogus, but it's actually legitimate, and I can click ignore, and then it won't come up anymore. But so most of what I'm doing is migrating to generic, the ones here that are obvious. C-172RG, Cessna 172RG. That's obviously an attempt to do an anonymous aircraft. And the other thing I can do is I can look at the flights. So here, this one has FMX in it. So that could have been a Canadian aircraft, or it might, FMX is often a brand of simulator. So one thing I might do is look at the flights here, and I can see who's got flights logged in it, and if they've logged it as ground sim, in which case it probably was a sim, or as total time, in which case it probably was total time. Another thing that it can do is, yeah, here's Frasca. I'm going to migrate that to a sim. FAA sim, that should have been a sim. And then there are other things that, like, there are rules around US tails. So for example, one of these is they don't use O's or zeros. At least not, it's always November 1 through 9. So maybe they put in a zero that didn't belong there, and I can click on this to remove that. Sometimes you have an issue where, you know, here 00FI, they never use an I, India, because it's too easily confused with a 1. So I can try converting that. If I think, you know, I might look up November 00F1AH. That'll obviously fail because of the preceding zeros. But if I decided that should have been a 1, I can convert the 0 to the 1 here. And so this just helps fix up, yeah, and here's more convert O or I to a 0 or 1. So November 955OU might have been November 4550U, and I can check that by clicking on that, and sure enough, look at that. It's an AA1C and AA1C. So that one I should do convert 0 to 1. All right, enough on pseudo-generic. Country codes. I have a whole set of, let me reload the page here. There we go. I have a whole set of country codes in the data, in the system, in the database. They have a prefix. I don't know why I have that column there twice. A country name, so that you can see it in the drop down. A locale code, and then for many of these, I may have a template for to be able to look up the registration for an aircraft. So in the case of a U.S. registered aircraft, I can put the N number right in there. I can also specify template mode and hyphenation rules. And what I mean by the template mode is whether I include the whole tail. So here, text equals includes the November, but some of them are suffix only. So for example, here for Australia, the VH, very complicated uh, template, and and it's this. The template uses this curly bracket 0 curly bracket to figure out where to put the value. But for Australian aircraft, the VH gets stripped, and you only pass in what's after the VH. And of course, others have no search. Then there's hyphenation rules. In the U.S., we don't put a hyphen after the country prefix. November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Many other countries are hyphenation. So Australia, it's VH hyphen. And I can click on fix aircraft hyphenation if I want, and that will go through all of the aircraft that have that prefix and make the hyphenation be consistent the way it's supposed to be. And you just click edit to change any of those. Cleanup maintenance I almost never use. Only real aircraft have maintenance. Oil changes and annual inspections. You don't need that for an anonymous aircraft, and you don't need it for a sim. But for old reasons, some aircraft still had that. You can put that. You can just clean that up. And so if I click that, so again, I almost never use this button. Then it will go through, find all the non-real aircraft and clean up the maintenance logs. And again, you can see none changed because the system's pretty good about making sure it never happens. Finally, and here's another one that I can't remember the last time I've ever used. If you have a set of aircraft that you know are supposed to be different models, you can upload a spreadsheet with 2 columns, a CSV file. Column is ID aircraft, which is the database ID of the aircraft you need to map, and the database ID of the model that it should be. And if you do the bulk mapping, it will blast all of those aircraft to be the new models. Use with care. I wonder if I should actually remove that. But again, I haven't had to use that in years. Those are the tools that admins have to manage aircraft. So again, the main ones that I use are the orphaned aircraft tool and the generic aircraft tool and the searching. And I respond to a couple of emails a day. But hopefully that explains sort of what's going on behind the scenes to keep the data clean.